Hail Internet, it's Matt here for the Dork Lords. If you're new to the channel, welcome. We talk about all manner of dorkly things here, so whether it's sci-fi, fantasy, superheroes, we probably have a playlist about it. Feel free to check us out. Today is another in our Dork Lord of the Rings segments. And today is part 2, the conclusion of our video about Finrod, the Elven King. So first, get a little recap. What happened in part 1? Okay, Finrod, Galadriel's older brother, reluctantly leaves his parents and his true love, Amarie, back in Aman, travels east to Middle-earth as part of the exodus of the Noldor elves. He's following Feanor and his sons. The Doom of Mandos states that anyone who follows Feanor is going to come to a bad end, but he goes anyway in order to lead his people, who are determined to go east. Finrod is the first elf to meet up with the House of Beor, the first house of the Edain. He uses his music to teach them lore, and he cements a really strong alliance between elves and men. And the House of Beor and the House of Finrod are united for many, many years to come. Finrod and Turgon, another elven king, receive visions from the Vala Ulmo, which compel each of them to build hidden strongholds to protect their people against Morgoth. For Turgon, this leads to him building the hidden realm of Gondolin. For Finrod, this leads to him building his kingdom in the caverns of Nargothrond, as well as building a couple of other defensive structures, such as Barad Nimros and Minas Tirith. Not that Minas Tirith, the original Minas Tirith, and these are towers designed to watch for Morgoth's forces. He also has a premonition that he's going to make an oath that will lead to his ruin. Years later, in the year 455 of the First Age, in the aftermath of the Battle of Sudden Flame, when Morgoth violently breaks the siege of Angband, Finrod and a small company of elves come under assault from orcs, and he is about to be slain or captured. When Barahir, of the House of Beor, that House of Beor, saves Finrod's life at the cost of many of his own men. In thanks, Finrod makes an oath of abiding friendship and aid in every need to Barahir and all his kin. And as a token of his vow, he gives Barahir his ring, which becomes known as the Ring of Barahir. It's the same ring that eventually comes to Aragorn in the Third Age. This is the oath that he foretold would lead to his downfall. So that catches us up. That was part 1. Beginning part 2. In the chaos of the Battle of Sudden Flame, 2 of the sons of Feanor, Celegorm and Curufin, are forced to flee their lands, and they come to stay in Finrod's kingdom in Nargothrond. As we'll see, their arrival in Nargothrond turns out poorly for Finrod, and it's almost as though the shadow of the Doom of Mandos just travels with them wherever they go. You know, they basically brought the Doom of Mandos to Nargothrond. Morgoth now has the elves on the run, but he can't find the 2 hidden realms, Gondolin and Nargothrond. Remember Ulmo's visions? Well, this is where they temporarily pay off, because those hidden realms are keeping the elves alive. Rumor came to Morgoth of these things, and he was unquiet amid his victories, and he desired greatly to learn tidings of Felagund and Turgon. For they had vanished out of knowledge, and yet were not dead. And he feared what they might yet accomplish against him. Of Nargothrond he knew indeed the name, but neither its place nor its strength. And of Gondolin he knew nothing. And the thought of Turgon troubled him the more. Therefore he sent forth ever more spies into Beleriand. So Morgoth is upping the search for these 2 hidden realms. Let's go back to Barahir. For 5 years after the Battle of Sudden Flame, he leads a small band of outlaws fighting against Morgoth's forces. One of his outlaw companions is his son, Beren, who's about to become arguably the greatest hero in Tolkien's mythology. One day in the year 460, Beren is running an errand, and when he returns to camp, he finds that everyone has been slain by orcs, including his father, Barahir. He is obviously terribly distraught, and he notes that the orcs have cut off Barahir's hand to take as a trophy. There Beren buried his father's bones, and raised a cairn of boulders above him, and swore upon it an oath of vengeance. First, therefore, he pursued the orcs that had slain his father and his kinsmen, and he found their camp by night. And because of his woodcraft, he came near to their fire unseen. There their captain made boast of his deeds, and he held up the hand of Barahir that he had cut off as a token for Sauron that their mission was fulfilled. And the ring of Felagund was on that hand. Then Beren sprang from behind a rock and slew the captain, and taking the hand and the ring he escaped, being defended by fate. For the orcs were dismayed, and their arrows wild. So Beren gets revenge for his father's death, and very importantly, he reclaims the Ring of Barahir. Note that he swore an oath of vengeance, which he quickly fulfilled. But this is this age of oaths, and all oaths carry major consequences. A few years later, Barahir meets and falls in love with Luthien, King Thingol's daughter. And Thingol gives Beren a seemingly impossible task in order to win Luthien's hand. Beren must acquire a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. Basically, Thingol assumes he's broken up the couple. Right? He assumes that either Beren will give up or he'll die trying. But Thingol is wrong. Beren, knowing that he's going to need help in this crazy venture, takes the Ring of Barahir and he goes in search of Nargothrond to cash in on Finrod's oath. Upon all that plain, the elves of Nargothrond kept unceasing watch, and every hill upon its borders was crowned with hidden towers, and through all its woods and fields archers ranged secretly and with great craft. Their arrows were sure and deadly, and nothing crept there against their will. Therefore, ere Beren had come far upon his road, they were aware of him, and his death was nigh. But knowing his danger, he held ever aloft the Ring of Felagund, and though he saw no living thing, because of the stealth of the hunters, he felt that he was watched, and cried often aloud, "I am Beren, son of Barahir, friend of Felagund, take me to the king!" Therefore the hunters slew him not, but assembling they waylaid him, and commanded him to halt. But seeing the ring, they bowed before him. So Beren is brought to Nargothrond for an audience with King Finrod. Again, he needs help in this insane errand to steal a Silmaril from Morgoth's crown. But remember, two of the sons of Feanor, Celegorm and Curufin, are also currently in Finrod's court. And they've sworn to oppose anyone who keeps the Silmarils from them. A tense argument ensues, and it's clear during this argument that they also see political advantage in screwing over Finrod. Because they're jerks. Thus Beren came before King Finrod Felagund, and Felagund knew him, needing no ring to remind him of the kin of Beor and of Barahir. Behind closed doors they sat, and Beren told of the death of Barahir, and of all that had befallen him in Doriath, and he wept, recalling Luthien and their joy together. But Felagund heard his tale in wonder and disquiet, and he knew that the oath he had sworn was come upon him for his death, as long before he had foretold to Galadriel. He spoke then to Beren in heaviness of heart. "It is plain that Fingal desires your death, but it seems that this doom goes beyond his purpose, and that the oath of Feanor is again at work. For the Silmarils are cursed with an oath of hatred, and he that even names them in desire moves a great power from slumber, and the sons of Feanor would lay all the elf kingdoms in ruin, rather than suffer any other than themselves to win or possess a Silmaril, for the oath drives them. And now Celegorm and Curufin are dwelling in my halls, and though I, Finarfin's son, am king, they have won a strong power in the realm and lead many of their own people. They have shown friendship to me in every need, but I fear they will show neither love nor mercy to you, if your quest be told. Yet my own oath holds, and thus we are all ensnared." Then King Felagund spoke before his people, recalling the deeds of Barahir and his vow, and he declared that it was laid upon him to aid the son of Barahir in his need, and he sought the help of his chieftains. Then Celegorm arose amid the throng, and drawing his sword, he cried, "Be he friend or foe, whether demon of Morgoth or elf, or child of men, or any other living thing in Arda, neither law, nor love, nor league of hell, nor might of the Valar, nor any power of wizardry shall defend him from the pursuing hate of Feanor's sons, if he take or find a Silmaril and keep it. For the Silmarils we alone claim until the world ends." And after Celegorm, Curufin spoke. And now they murmured that Finarfin's son was not as a Vala to command them, and they turned their faces from him. But the curse of Mandos came upon the brothers, and dark thoughts arose in their hearts, thinking to send forth Felagund alone to his death, and to usurp, it might be, the throne of Nargothrond, for they were of the eldest line of the princes of the Noldor. And Felagund, seeing that he was forsaken, took from his head the silver crown of Nargothrond, and cast it at his feet, saying, "Your oaths of faith to me you may break, but I must hold to my bond. Yet, if there be any on whom the shadow of our curse has not yet fallen, I should find at least a few to follow me, and should not go hence as a beggar that is thrust from the gates." There were 10 that stood by him, and the chief of them, who was named Edrahil, stooping, lifted the crown, and asked that it be given to a steward until Felagund's return. "For you remain my king, and theirs," he said, "whatever betide." Then Felagund gave the crown of Nargothrond to Orodreth his brother, to govern in his stead. And Celegorm and Curufin said nothing, but they smiled and went from the halls. So that's a very powerful moment. Here we see Finrod giving up his crown in order to honor his oath, even though he knows that this oath is going to lead to his death. And he sets out with Beren to get a Silmaril. Now, thanks to Celegorm and Curufin and their poisonous words, only 10 elves volunteer to accompany them. And I'll just say it now, they're all red shirts. Sorry, but it was nice knowing you, Edrahil. You're valiant, but you're also a red shirt. Finrod leaves Orodreth in charge of the kingdom. Remember from part 1 that Orodreth is actually Finrod's nephew, not his brother. And we see that Celegorm and Curufin certainly have designs on claiming Nargothrond for themselves. But Finrod leaves behind all of that political intrigue along with his crown, and he sets off on the most dangerous quest of all time. And this is where actually the story turns into an awesome D&D module. I'm hoping Finrod brought his D20. That's all I'm saying. On an evening of autumn, Felagund and Beren set out from Nargothrond with their 10 companions. Beneath the shadowy mountains they came upon a company of orcs, and slew them all in their camp by night. And they took their gear and their weapons. By the arts of Felagund, their own forms and faces were changed into the likeness of orcs, and thus disguised they came far upon their northward road. But Sauron in his tower was ware of them, and doubt took him, for they went in haste and stayed not to report their deeds, as was commanded to all the servants of Morgoth that passed that way. Therefore he sent to waylay them, and bring them before him. Thus befell the contest of Sauron and Felagund, which is renowned. For Felagund strove with Sauron in songs of power, and the power of the king was very great. But Sauron had the mastery, as is told in the Lay of Leithian. So we see Finrod using his magic here. After they kill off this band of orcs, they take their armor, and then Finrod uses his powers to make them look like orcs. And using this disguise, they pass through enemy territory. Sauron notices that they don't check in properly, has them captured and brought before him. Sauron suspects they're spies, but Finrod's enchantment is still holding. And here's where we get a legit wizard's duel. It's really, really cool. Sauron sings songs of power to remove their disguises, and Finrod sings to resist. And you can picture the scene of these two impressive figures standing a few feet apart, singing spells at each other. It's very evocative. And here's how it's described in the poetry of the Lay of Leithian. He chanted a song of wizardry, of piercing, opening, of treachery, revealing, uncovering, betraying. Then sudden Felagund there swaying, sang in answer a song of staying, resisting, battling against power, of secrets kept, strength like a tower, and trust unbroken, freedom, escape, of changing and of shifting shape, of snares eluded, broken traps, the prison opening, the chain that snaps. Backwards and forwards swayed their song, reeling and foundering, as ever more strong the chanting swelled. Felagund fought, and all the magic and might he brought of Elveness into his words. Softly in the gloom they heard the birds singing afar in Nargothrond, the sighing of the sea beyond, beyond the western world, on sand of pearls in Elven land. Then the gloom gathered, darkness growing, in Valinor, the red blood flowing beside the sea, where the Noldor slew the foam riders, and stealing drew their white ships and their white sails. The wolf howls, the ravens flee, the ice mutters in the mouths of the sea. The captives sad in Angband mourn, thunder rumbles and fires burn, and Finrod fell before the throne. This is awesome. This is a great battle. I love the imagery. Sauron proves to be stronger at spell singing than Finrod. And keep in mind that in this tale, the tale of Beren and Luthien, we see power emanating through music several times. The most powerful songs come from Luthien herself. She fools Morgoth with her song. So the nature of this duel fits within the Lay of Lathian. Note that Sauron does not kill Finrod in this moment. He merely removes the disguise. It's interesting that Finrod attempts to keep Sauron at bay by evoking imagery of Valinor. And then Sauron breaks him down by finding the memory of the first kinslaying. It's this secret guilt. Even though Finrod didn't participate, I think he bears this emotional weight from that tragedy. And it's perhaps the secret that's most difficult for him to hide. And so it's unlocking that memory that overwhelms Finrod's defenses. That's what I take out of it. Then Sauron stripped from them their disguise, and they stood before him naked and afraid. But though their kinds were revealed, Sauron could not discover their names or their purposes. He cast them therefore into a deep pit, dark and silent, and threatened to slay them cruelly, unless one would betray the truth to him. From time to time, they saw two eyes kindled in the dark, and a werewolf devoured one of the companions. But none betrayed their lord. So this is terrifying stuff, right? So Finrod, Beren, and the Red Shirts have been imprisoned in the very tower that Finrod built. This was Minas Tirith. But it has now been reclaimed by the bad guys and renamed Tol Ungaurhoth, which means Isle of Werewolves. Sauron knows that they're not orcs, but he doesn't know who they are or what their mission is. So he's having them eaten by werewolves one at a time until they talk. So it's so grim, just dark torture. To their credit, our red shirts are staying silent. In the pits of Sauron, Beren and Felagund lay, and all their companions were now dead. But Sauron purposed to keep Felagund to the last, for he perceived that he was a Noldo of great might and wisdom, and he deemed that in him lay the secret of their errand. But when the wolf came for Beren, Felagund put forth all his power and burst his bonds, and he wrestled with the werewolf and slew it with his hands and teeth. Yet he himself was wounded to the death. Then he spoke to Beren, saying, I go now to my long rest in the timeless halls beyond the seas and the mountains of Aman. It will be long ere I am seen among the Noldor again, and it may be that we shall not meet a second time in death or life, for the fates of our kindreds are apart. Farewell. He died then in the dark in Tol Ungaurhoth, whose great tower he himself had built. Thus King Finrod Felagund fairest and most beloved of the house of Finrod, redeemed his oath, but Beren mourned beside him in despair. So here we see one of the most selfless acts of heroism in Tolkien's mythology. Finrod sees that Beren is next to be eaten. He summons the strength to break his chains, and he kills a werewolf with his bare hands and his teeth, because he has no weapons, and he's mortally wounded in the process. So it turns out that Thingol's impossible quest, intended to kill Beren, kills Finrod instead. We also see here that Sauron underestimates Beren. Right? He assumes instead that Finrod is the leader of this group. And of course we see that he'll underestimate humanity at the end of the Third Age as well. Luthien now shows up to rescue Beren, and we get a good look at her power. Then Luthien stood upon the bridge and declared her power, and the spell was loosed that bound stone to stone, and the gates were thrown down, and the walls opened, and the pits laid bare. But Beren came not, and Luthien found him mourning by Felagund. They buried the body of Felagund upon the hilltop of his own isle, and it was clean again. And the green grave of Finrod Finarfin's son, fairest of all the princes of the elves, remained inviolate until the land was changed and broken and foundered under destroying seas. But Finrod walks with Finarfin his father beneath the trees in Eldamar. So there's a bunch to take in from that quote. First, we see where Finrod is buried. He is buried right there on Tol Sirion. We also see how powerful Luthien's spellcraft is. She destroys the tower, and she cleanses the land. And that last sentence is so revealing. This is maybe the most important sentence in the life of Finrod. But Finrod walks with Finarfin his father beneath the trees in Eldamar. Right? I mean, this means that Finrod overcame the doom of Mandos. The Valar allowed him to return after his body was slain. So, while honoring this oath to Barahir's son resulted in Finrod's death, that act redeemed him in the eyes of the West. And now he's back with his parents, both of whom stayed in the West, and he's reunited with his true love, Amarie, who also stayed in the West. So this actually turns into a story with a happy ending for Finrod. Not many Noldor received that honor in the First Age. This puts Finrod in the same category as Glorfindel, who was allowed to come back after falling in battle with a Balrog. So Finrod beats the odds. Well done, Finrod! After the Isle of Werewolves is cleansed by Luthien, several of the former prisoners return home to Nargothrond, and they tell Orodreth what happened. There was tumult in Nargothrond, for thither now returned many elves that had been prisoners in the Isle of Sauron, and a clamor arose that no words of Celegorm could still. They lamented bitterly the fall of Felagund their king, saying that a maiden had dared that which the sons of Feanor had not dared to do. But many perceived that it was treachery rather than fear that had guided Celegorm and Curufin. Therefore the hearts of the people of Nargothrond were released from their dominion, and they turned again to the house of Finarfin, and they obeyed Orodreth. But he would not suffer them to slay the brothers, as some desired. For the spilling of kindred blood by kin would bind the curse of Mandos more closely upon them all. Yet neither bread nor rest would he grant to Celegorm and Curufin within his realm, and he swore that there should be little love between Nargothrond and the sons of Feanor thereafter. So the people realized that the sons of Feanor were just exploiting the situation for political gain, and since their actions resulted in Finrod's death, they want the sons executed. But Orodreth concludes, wisely, I think, that they would just be enacting another kinslaying, which would bring judgment upon them all. And so instead of killing Celegorm and Curufin, he banishes them, basically. Get out, but be lucky that you still have your lives. And that's the story of Finrod Felagund, a wise, noble king who united elves and men, who suffered for his principles, and earned redemption. I'll finish off with one final quote that discusses the fate of Finrod's kingdom, Nargothrond. While Finrod was able to overcome the doom of Mandos, Nargothrond wasn't so lucky. It's a long story involving the hero Turin, who aids in the defense of the realm, and Glaurung, the father of dragons, who is slain by Turin, but not before wiping out the inhabitants of Nargothrond. Orodreth is killed in battle. And after all that has transpired, the last of the petty dwarves, Mim, who I mentioned in part 1, returns to the empty husk of Nargothrond and reclaims it in the name of the petty dwarves, who were its original inhabitants. Unfortunately for Mim, he screwed over Turin by revealing the location of his camp to Morgoth. And in this final quote, we see that Turin's father, Hurin, a mighty hero in his own right, who was recently freed from the worst torture of all time at the hands of Morgoth, had shown up at Nargothrond looking for revenge. Here it must be told that after the departure of Glaurung, Mim, the petty dwarf, had found his way to Nargothrond and crept within the ruined halls, and he took possession of them and sat there, fingering the gold and the gems, letting them run ever through his hands. For none came nigh to despoil him, from dread of the spirit of Glaurung and his very memory. But now one had come, and stood upon the threshold, and Mim came forth, and demanded to know his purpose. But Hurin said, "Who are you, that would hinder me from entering the house of Finrod Felagund?" Then the dwarf answered, "I am Mim, and before the proud ones came from over the sea, dwarves delved the halls of Nuluk-His-Deen. I have but returned to take what is mine, for I am the last of my people." "Then you shall enjoy your inheritance no longer," said Hurin. "For I am Hurin, son of Galdor, returned out of Angband, and my son was Turin Turambar, whom you have not forgotten. And he it was that slew Glaurung the dragon, who wasted these halls where you now sit. And not unknown is it to me by whom the dragon helm of Dorlomin was betrayed." Then Mim, in great fear, besought Hurin to take what he would, but to spare his life. But Hurin gave no heed to his prayer, and slew him there before the doors of Nargothrond. Then he entered in, and stayed a while in that dreadful place, where the treasures of Valinor lay strewn upon the floors in darkness and decay. But it is told that when Hurin came forth from the wreck of Nargothrond and stood again beneath the sky, he bore with him, out of all that great hoard, but one thing only. And what was that one thing? The Nauglamir, the necklace of the dwarves that had been made for Finrod. Hurin then brings the Nauglamir to Thingol in Doriath and presents it as a gift. Thingol also receives a Silmaril from Beren, as a result of completing that impossible quest, thanks in part to Finrod, and Thingol decides to place the Silmaril in the necklace. This results in Thingol's murder, because the dwarves that he requisitions to do the work demand to keep the item, and they kill him for it. So while Thingol's impossible quest resulted in Finrod's death, it also resulted in his own death. And it's the seemingly effortless intertwining of these myriad epic tales that reveals the true mastery of Tolkien. It's genius work. And so, yes, we see how the tales of the sons of Feanor overlap with Finrod's tale, overlaps with Thingol's tale, overlaps with the tale of Beren and Luthien. They're all interconnected in this grand design that's just beautiful to behold. So, thank you everybody. That is the story of Finrod Felagund. Thank you so much. If you've got a topic you'd like me to do a video on, please put it in the comments. Be happy to do a video about a topic of your choosing. Thanks so much, everybody. Bye.